Okay, thank you all for joining us. My name is Neil Nakash, and I'm the Director of Programming for NAAMA NextGen. This is the first session in our Coast to Coast admissions series, and I'm really honored to be joined by Miss Mae Langston, who's Admissions Officer at Georgetown University School of Medicine in Washington, D.C. And before we get into the admissions panel, I just want to speak a little bit about NAAMA NextGen. Um, and the work that we do, as well as Georgetown University School of Medicine in our NAAMA NextGen chapter there. So for those of you who aren't familiar with NAAMA NextGen, what our mission is, it's to bring together Arab American healthcare students and support them in their career goals. And I'll really speak about how we go about supporting them in their career goals in just a moment. And as part of our vision and values, our vision in the long term is that we hope that one day NAMA NextGen will have chapters in all undergraduate and graduate institutions in the United States of America, particularly where there is a presence of Arab Americans. We hope that NAMA NextGen will be a network for all Arab American healthcare students, and that it'll promote the voices and needs of all Arab American healthcare students. And we say Arab American healthcare students because we're using a broad definition. We have medical school chapters, pre-med chapters, but also dental school chapters. Really core to our mission is the Arab American identity. We are serving largely Arab American students, but we want to also make sure that what we're doing is we're doing it with intention. We're creative about how we do it. We're also inclusive. So our events are open to all people, not just Arab American students. So while focused on the Arab American identity, it is a secular organization. So really over the past 5 years, NAMA NextGen has grown considerably. It was first established in 2018, which is not 5 years. That's wow, that's 8 years. Um, and it's at 50 plus chapters across medical schools, dental schools, and undergraduate institutions, with a total of 1,250 plus members. And part of what we do is, in addition to just hosting chapter events that, serve the purpose of connecting students to each other, and just, part of our mission is having fun. So in addition to like, having social events where people can have fun, we also engage in forms of professional development. Some two prominent ways that we engage in that are our national summit and the research symposium. At these events, what we do is we have a wide range of speakers and panels. And at the research symposiums, there's a board of judges that actually look through all the abstracts of the research abstracts submitted to us, and award people an oral presentation. So at our latest research symposium, we were happy to have 3 oral presentations presented and over 50 posters presented. In addition, we also engage in research ourselves. So just a little plug, I guess, for myself as well as Dina. And the top right corner, this is an example of a poster Dina and I worked on in collaboration with our national co-chair, which is Dr. Ruba Ali Fahmi. And she's a breast pathologist at the University of Michigan Medical School. And she was able to help us engage in research pertaining to Syrian refugee women and healthcare workers in Lebanon. In addition, we also have an internship in Lebanon. Unfortunately, due to the tension in the region right now and the ongoing violence in the region, we have put a pause on the internship. But this was one of the greatest opportunities through NAMA NextGen that I got to experience when I got to go to Beirut back in May 2025, and just witness care in a really different setting. I guess another self plug is that we also have a podcast, and one released today. So if you are interested in podcasts, please check out my episode today with Dr. Nahid Badelia, who was a senior policy advisor for the White House on the COVID-19 pandemic response. And since we are here with the Georgetown University School of Medicine, I really wanted to highlight our chapter over there. Specifically, our members right here. This is Imran Nahas, and you could see this pic just has so much aura, but what he's doing is he is reading the oath at the white coat ceremony, but reading it out in Arabic, which I think that is something really cool that Georgetown University School of Medicine offers. In addition, we have another one of our members from the white coat ceremony 2 years ago right here, which is Modar Duaidari. And he was involved in NAMA when he was an undergrad, and now he's a medical student at Georgetown. And he was able to provide me with a lot of the images and these things. So down here is one of the big events organized by Georgetown's NAMA NextGen chapter, and it's a physician and student networking session. Right here, just an example of a social event. I believe this might be from one of their cooking events. I know that they had a cooking event, which is really cool. And then this is just, some of our members. But without further ado, I really just want to welcome Miss Mae Langston. She serves as an admissions officer for Georgetown University School of Medicine and has been with the School of Medicine since 2025. Prior to joining the Office of Admissions, she worked in the nonprofit sector, supporting initiatives focused on expanding access to healthcare. Ms. Mae Langston brings a strong commitment to partnering with prospective students as they pursue their goals of becoming transformative physicians and is dedicated to advancing the Georgetown University School of Medicine's mission of educating ethical and compassionate physicians and service to others. So, just really thank you so much for being with us today. I'm excited to get started on our session.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, and it's great to be here this evening.
So, oh, sorry, my screen is glitching. One moment. Okay. So I first just really wanted to start us off by asking you, what does the admissions process look like at Georgetown?
Yeah, absolutely. So our admissions process is mission driven and holistic. So this basically means that every application is reviewed in full. So there's no automated, screening or cutoff system. Every single application is looked at and reviewed in full. And so the committee evaluates applicants across 7 core areas. And so, first, looking at these areas individually, and then collectively in regards to the whole applicant. And I can speak a little bit more about these 7 areas later on, but really just looking that these applicants reflect our mission, Georgetown's, commitment to service, and then our mission of Cura Personalis, which is care for the whole person. So that kind of goes back to our holistic review of applicants.
Most definitely. I mean, I hear a lot about, schools like noting that they review their applicants holistically. And
Mhm.
you mentioned like those core 7 parts. But I just want to first speak about, I think one of them is really academic excellence. So can
Mhm.
you speak about how much weight GPA and MCAT carry in the admissions process at Georgetown?
Yes, absolutely. So, GPA and MCAT are definitely two of the 7 categories that will go into your application review. Definitely important, to see that we understand your academic background, your growth, your commitment to science. But that being said, they're not weighted more heavily than any of the other 7 categories. So, going back to that, us not having any cutoff scores, we really do look at the applicants in regards to all 7 areas. And then academic metrics really are considered alongside your clinical experiences, research experiences, as well as your service experiences.
So we got a question actually from our registration, and
Yeah.
while we're talking about academic excellence and those kind of things, it's very natural for some people to, struggle when first entering undergrad or just have humps along the way. So, for those students who struggled early in college, but they like showed strong improvement later, how do admissions communities really evaluate that?
Absolutely. I think exactly what you said, Neil, of just seeing that upward growth is a huge, credit to one's academic strength, integrity, their grit to keep pushing through. Of course, academic challenges can happen, whether it's from like an external force of something happening, in one's personal life, as well as just challenging classes and challenging coursework. And so I think the biggest thing on our side is just to see that upward growth and continued perseverance throughout those courses, including, an applicant may have struggled more in undergrad, but say they, did a post-bac or a master's program and really excelled in their classes then, that would definitely speak to their academic rigor.
And it's part of like just showing the having a breadth of experiences. There's an activity section that students complete and includes
Mhm.
15 activities, and we'll be talking a little bit more about this later on. But what kind of experiences is your school looking for beyond just clinical or research experiences? And which experiences really tend to stand out the most?
Yes, yeah. So falling under our kind of like seven main criteria components, three of those in regards to your experiences are your clinical experiences, your research experiences, and then your service experiences. And so, specifically for your clinical experience, this is something that we want to see you've had, direct exposure under the guidance of a physician to kind of see that physician to patient interaction, um, really understand what that person to person, relationship looks like. In regards to research, on that end, we just want to see that you know and understand the research process, that you understand what that looks like, that you, value the significance of it within the medical field. And then just lastly, still speaking to the experiences, service to the underserved, is definitely a very critical part of your component that we are reviewing here at Georgetown. Given that that is, so much in alignment with our mission, we definitely want to see that our applicants, have worked with underserved communities. This means, direct interaction person to person with underserved communities. It doesn't have to solely be in a medical realm. This could be working in a soup kitchen, working with an organization like Best Buddies, just showing that you've had that direct interaction with underserved communities and then can translate that through your application into what that looks like with a medical career.
I'm going to shift gears a little bit now, and this, of course, is an essential component of the application, which is really the personal statement.
Hmm.
And I remember I was just looking up how many applications does Georgetown receive, and I was stunned to see that 16,000 is how many you received this year. So after reading all those personal statements, I imagine that some really start to sound similar or identical even. From your experience, what have you seen like make a personal statement memorable or strong?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the biggest thing in that is that your authentic voice just shines through. And so when, starting to think about writing your personal statement and thinking about what you want to include in that, just maintaining that authenticity and ensuring that you're really being true to yourself, true to why you're choosing medicine, and just kind of really honing in on that as you're beginning to write your personal statement. I think from the admission standpoint, having that unique voice and story allows us to really understand why an applicant not only, feels called to medicine, but why they, could see themselves potentially at Georgetown. And so just really working to, genuinely and thoughtfully articulate what that means for you personally. And, that can come, personal statements can look a variety of ways. And that's because, applicants come to medicine from a variety of ways and times. And I think just really, I would encourage applicants to stay true to themselves and true to their authentic voices.
And oftentimes when people write personal statements, they really include their experiences, especially clinical experiences, to demonstrate their motivation towards becoming a physician.
Hmm.
But one of our audience members actually had a really interesting questions that I haven't thought hadn't thought of, which is they were asking, is it a red flag if your most extensive clinical experiences is not mentioned in the personal statement?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think definitely I would not say that is a red flag. I think if your most extensive clinical experience, isn't the primary element that you're discussing during your personal statement, as long as, as I just mentioned, like you are speaking in your true voice, you're being really authentic as to why you feel called to medicine, we will see that your, most impactful clinical experiences, we will see that in the rest of your application and can, understand how that will play a critical role. And so, definitely not a red flag if it's not included in your personal statement. That being said, if it, is the primary influence or reason that you are called to medicine, don't feel like you have to be deterred to include it. I think just again, going back to everyone's path to medicine looks different. So just speaking truly to that, and then also knowing that if you don't include it, we of course will see it in your activities and experiences portion of your application. But just kind of going back to the red flag side of things, I think the most thing is just in regards to the application as a whole, I think things that do stand out more on the red flag side is just when applications do come across more generic, when, it feels clear that they have kind of been copy and pasted for each school. And I think then what really sets an applicant apart, is when it's, very evident that they've done their research into Georgetown, that they feel, they are really in alignment with our mission and values, and that they have used, there's the secondary elements of their application to specifically articulate that, in regards to Georgetown and our, unique mission and values.
Just kind of thinking about that piece about, articulating mission fit. What are
Hmm.
things students can do to really articulate that, just beyond, mentioning programs that they see themselves aligned with? Is it just from their experiences, highlighting how their experiences match the mission, or is there something else?
Yeah, great question. And I think it can, really come about in a multitude of ways. I think, as mentioned, our mission being cura personalis, and that being care for the whole person, that to us, means not only do we believe that physicians need to be taking care of their whole selves before they're able to fully take care of others, but also that when we are interacting with patients, we are looking at them as a whole person and not just, a symptom of their disease or whatever reason they have, come before you. And so I think any application can, kind of reflect that in a variety of ways. I think being able to understand not just the mission of Georgetown, but how that then reflects into a career of physicianship, and then being able to, in turn, discuss your, past experiences, things that have shaped you in alignment with your understanding of what, being a physician in service of others looks like. And then additionally, I think being able to speak to the physician you hope to be and what future experiences at Georgetown specifically could shape you into that really shows that you, not only understand kind of the structure and basic information about Georgetown, but that you also can really, thoughtfully envision yourself as a one-day physician, with the training and guidance of faculty and staff here at Georgetown.
I really hear you when talking about, how do those activities especially fit the mission? And one of the primary place really where students can talk about or applicants can talk about their activities is, of course, the activity section that we kind of teased earlier. Um, but we often hear different things about writing experiences in the AMCAS primary application. Some people say they should be like more narrative format. Some people say it should be almost like more resume style, like very descriptive and concise. What is, your unit school's preference for this? Like, how should students really structure their activity section?
For sure. So what we, really recommend in regards to, the most effective way to get across your experiences, and to help us as, the admissions office really understand and determine how, they've influenced your past path to medicine, is to structure them through, clear descriptive writing. Our, admissions committee wants to understand exactly what you did. So being, specific about your roles, specific about those responsibilities in the roles, and then in turn, the impact that your work through those experiences had. Um, you are able to designate three experiences as your most meaningful experiences. And those entries, you can expound more narratively if you would like. But even in these cases, ensuring that you still have clarity and detail, that's definitely a priority. So, regardless of format, just being sure to avoid using, unexplained acronyms. And really just ensuring that anyone reading your application can understand your experiences without additional context. So, if you look at, your description of an experience and feel like maybe, an outsider with no previous knowledge of, the community you worked with or the organization you were a part of might not know, some of the terms or some of the, metrics. I think ensuring that that is really clearly laid out helps us get, the full grasp as to how that experience shaped you.
And it's really difficult to do that sometimes because I just think about how brief the activity section is with defining each acronym when you only have like so much space. I guess what is like the rule with that? Is it you just define it once, either in the title or the first few sentences, and that's okay. You can use an acronym like afterward. Like I guess this is sort of more of like a logistics question, but like
Yeah.
how should students approach that?
For sure. I think as long as it is defined, in full, you definitely can use the acronym if it's, easy to reference back in, the same section. So I think just ensuring it has at least been, described in full at some point. We definitely understand, it's hard to fit in all of the information you have, especially when, experiences often have, you know, many terms or, intense descriptions within them, but um, understanding that, the impact of your work as well as the responsibilities you had within your work is really what you want to get across. And so sometimes it can be easy to get kind of stuck in the filler words or the filler descriptors. But if you feel like you're not able to fully explain what you did and how that made an impact, then that would be kind of an encouragement to restructure it so that that is more clearly laid out.
You brought up something I think it was, just maybe a minute or so ago, which was something about the most meaningful experience. For context, there are three activities you can
Mhm.
designate as most meaningful, and that includes like an extended portion to speak to write about. So in addition to the shorter section, there's also that most meaningful section. How should students approach writing those differently? I know you said like, if you'd like to include narrative styles, you can, but is that essential? What is like, I guess, the most effective way of doing so?
For sure. As mentioned, I this is a great opportunity if you would like to write narratively to utilize that. Definitely not a hard and fast rule on either end, but if that does allow you to speak more, provide more reflection as to how those experiences shaped you, that's definitely not a deterrent to, write in the narrative sense. These entries, we encourage applicants to view them as an opportunity to really go beyond simply just outlining what they did, and instead to really articulate how these experiences shaped their path to medicine, and then contributed to their personal growth, or motivation, in regards to their character as a whole. So I think just the biggest thing for all experiences, whether they're designated as most meaningful or not, just making sure that you are clearly and concisely writing in a way that is, easy for someone to understand, not only, what the work was, but why. Um, you were impacted by it and why you believe it is meaningful in your path towards medicine. And so, again, just kind of going back to the most meaningful side, I think viewing that as an opportunity to expound a little bit more about your perspective on insight and impact of your work. And then in regards to the additional standard entries, those are a little bit more just clear and effective descriptions about the work you did specifically.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, again, like I feel like in that such a such short space, but you have so much to talk about. Sometimes, you don't need to get all up in like those details about how things made you feel. So I think this is really
Mhm.
helpful. And, I wish I had heard this advice when I was going into the application cycle. Um, and so with the activity section, there's room for 15 activities.
Mhm.
But is it essential for applicants to reach 15 activities, or if not 15, but like at least close to it? Like, is it a red flag if people fall short of like that marker?
Yes, so definitely not essential for applicants to have 15 activities. Of course, those entries are there if an applicant chooses to, but definitely not a red flag. If we do tell applicants that if you have experiences you're kind of considering or just thinking about including, we encourage applicants to just go ahead and include them because it's a wonderful further insight for us into the experiences that shaped you to want to become a physician. However, there's no expectation to fill all 15 slots. So definitely, don't feel like you have to scavenge for, filling the last however many that you don't have. But we do just encourage applicants to really, rather than focusing on the quantity, focusing on the depth and quality of your involvement, and the, large scale impact that those experiences had on you.
So I hear you in terms of, really focusing on quality over quantity. But is it ever a red flag when when an applicant doesn't have enough activities? And like for example, if someone only has 8 activities, like is can that also be a red flag?
Definitely not a red flag. So, not we do not view having 8 activities as a red flag at all. I think speaking back to that point, if it's 8 things that you think played a really meaningful role in your not only development as a future physician but also just your personal growth and development, um absolutely, we want to see what those are and understand how they shaped you. But again, if you have 8 wonderful activities that you found really meaningful, that is wonderful. And no need to really scramble for, the rest to get to 15.
Mhm.
But so I guess the advice kind of is sounds maybe twofold or I guess just
Sure.
saying of we encourage you if you're just thinking about it to go ahead and include it because it's great further context for us. But if you don't feel like there's anything additional you want to share, definitely we don't view having less than 15 as a red flag or having any sort of negative impact on your application.
I think that's phenomenal advice because we were kind of talking about this before, but pre-meds are so busy themselves with so many things and sometimes like so many little things, but they just add up
Hmm.
to a lot. And I think it's really practical advice to say, like, maybe focus on the things that you're more passionate about, those things that are changing who you are and changing
Hmm.
you not only as a future physician, but also as a person. Um, so, really great advice there. We're going to shift gears a little bit to just speak about your school in particular. And this is also something we were talking about briefly before the call, which is that we know that some schools, especially public schools, whether in Texas, Michigan, California, they really tend to have a sort of in-state preference. Georgetown is, of course, a private institution, but does demonstrating regional ties or just like a connectedness to the DC area ever play a role in the admissions process?
Great question. So going back to, our mission aligned review and holistic approach to admissions, we do not, prioritize or hold any weight on one specific element of an applicant. So, we don't give preferential weight to regional ties. All applicants are, reviewed through the whole same holistic lens. Um, and no single component is weighed more heavily than the other. But that being said, kind of to what I was speaking to earlier, just in regards to, your understanding of a school and your understanding of its mission. I think in regards to any medical school that an applicant is applying to, really utilizing your application as an opportunity to demonstrate that really clear and thoughtful understanding of the school specifically, and not only the school, but also, the community it's a part of. So for us here at Georgetown, that being the DC community, I think having that understanding and showing that you have done your research, that you really see yourself fitting into this community, that really sets an applicant apart and shows that they, not only have done a lot of strong preparation and prior research, but that they also have a really genuine interest in engaging with not only the Georgetown community, but the DC community at large. So, while there's no preferential weight if you do or don't have regional ties to DC, I think you utilizing your application as a means to highlight your understanding of this community, and then also, your genuine interest and excitement about being a part of it.
And you mentioned like how Georgetown has those seven values, and of course, very core to that is cura personalis, as you mentioned, which is care for the whole person. How can, how do you as admissions officer evaluate this quality in applicants? And what does it look like in a strong application? For example, just saying it versus actually showing it. I guess, they really say show, don't tell in an application.
Mhm.
How have you seen it been showcased in a really strong way?
Yeah, that's a really wonderful question. And just as much as we are kind of reviewing the applications holistically and, looking at the applicants and their, mission-driven sense, we also are understanding and looking at how, they've articulated their experiences with others and perceived that. And of course, that speaks to Cura Personalis as a whole. So that could be something like really utilizing your service experiences to demonstrate, work that you have done with underserved communities, how those interactions have shaped, not only you as a future physician, but also you as a person, and being able to speak to, a broader understanding of, this not just being your experience is not just being a means to, check off a box or get to, get to the application process, but more so as a genuine, experience and opportunity of growth for you to not only, expand your perspective and insight and knowledge, but also to, continue to broaden your community, the people that you get to interact with and have a genuine understanding for. And so I think just speaking to your experiences in the ways that they have, tangibly and distinctly shaped you, speaking to the humanity of it, whether that be, like I said before, service work as well as, clinical work or interactions with classmates. I think in ensuring that that humanity side of things is a part of your application helps us to see not only that you understand Cura Personalis, but that you are also, embodying it yourself.
And I really hear you talking about the importance of like being authentic. Like you could tell when someone is really just trying to check a box off versus like, no, their experiences demonstrate what they value and the kind of
Mhm.
physician they would like to be. And sort of building on that, beyond just being like inauthentic in your application, what is the most common red flag that you see applicants make?
That's another great question. I think a big thing and kind of speaking to, what I mentioned earlier about having your distinct voice, really utilizing, your secondary essays, as well as your personal statement to, give us some better understanding into who you are as a unique individual. Um, Something we definitely see is that, applicants can often view that whether it be their essays or, letters of recommendation as an opportunity to kind of reinforce their academic experiences. And so, from our end of things, your transcripts already, reflect all of your academic experiences. So this is all knowledge and insight that we have and that we, are keeping in mind as we're reading your essays as well as your letters. Um, so not feeling like you need to use that, as an opportunity to reinforce those things that are already listed, on your transcript. Additionally, kind of as I mentioned earlier, speaking to your letters, you know, if a if a whether it be a professor or someone else that you've chosen, if they really can't speak to your character as an individual, for example, if it's something like, Neil was a wonderful applicant, or excuse me, a wonderful student and he made straight A's, but that's kind of all they can write about you. That is, again, kind of a reiteration of your transcript, but doesn't give us great insight into who you are and how you've had that personal interaction with your letter writer. So while we do, ask that you submit a letter from a professor so that we can have, understanding for your academic background, we also encourage you to, think thoughtfully about people who can actually speak to you genuinely. And that can come about, through a variety of, connections, mentors, professors, whoever that may be. But I think all in all, just to kind of summarize, I think not feeling like you need to reiterate your academic experiences in the elements of your application that you do get to make more customized. So, like your letters or your essays, not feeling like that's something you need to, maximize all, ensuring that all elements of your academics are reiterated there, because again, we do have all of that information and we do, are having that all in mind as we're reading, your essays and letters.
And I think that's great advice because, as you mentioned earlier, your school, like many others, has that holistic process. So if there's like too much of a focus on the academics, but not your professional and personal characteristics, sometimes an application can fall short, I imagine. I do want to give some time for um, some students Q&A. So just one last question before we move into that segment. And it'd be remiss to not mention this, which is that AI has boomed and it's become, just a huge part in our day-to-day lives over the past 3 years. So what are your school's policies surrounding the use of AI when it comes to editing or drafting parts of the personal statement, secondaries, or other materials?
Yeah, great question, and definitely, very relevant in this time. With the rise of AI tools, as I've mentioned earlier, it's really important to remember that the written components are of your application are, one of the primary ways we can understand who you are as an individual. And so, while tools can be helpful, over reliance on it is definitely it's definitely evident to us and
Hmm.
to us indicates that maybe we haven't seen the thoughtful time and preparation and interest specifically to write authentically to yourself. And so we just really encourage applicants to thoughtfully and authentically write in their own personal voice, and not only in their voice, but to speak to the things that have shaped them. And I think it's really important to remember that your essays are one of the few times that you can, really individualize yourself. And so I think in a lot of ways, over-reliance on that AI can diminish, that personal voice. I think just remembering that we definitely can, recognize a response that lacks that genuine voice and staying true to yourself in your essay writing allows us to get a better full picture as to who you are as an applicant.
I imagine you guys have become just complete experts in that, just reviewing thousands upon thousands of applications at a time that you're like, why do these have the same structure? Why do these all have the same format? So this is this is great advice. I do want to move into the student Q&A portion now. So if you
Absolutely.
have any questions, feel free to use the raise your hand function on Zoom, and we can select you to speak on it. Yes, Omar Fahmi.
Yeah, hi, May. Thank you so much for being here. It's been a pleasure hearing from you. I'm just curious, I guess, more of a commentary and a question. There's over 10,000 applicants to most medical schools. I know Georgetown's especially popular. And there's a lot of impressive people doing really cool things. I think a lot of it is how it's conveyed. So I guess like do you see a common theme in how people talk about their activities? I can't help but think, there's a lot of impressive people out there, but how important is it like how that's being conveyed? Uh, I'm in medical school myself, and I can't help but think like I'm sure my class could be replaced like 4 times over with people who deserve it. 10,000 people applied to my school. So what is I guess the importance of writing? And I guess straight up like yeah, what is the value of just writing in the application? What advice would you give to people and how they should write?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. And, just as much as this is a really, stressful and trying and intense time for applicants, it's also really important to remember that it's a time for applicants to determine where they want to be and what school is the best fit for them. And so we completely understand that, this is a process that takes time for applicants to determine, what fit they are most interested in for a med school, where they most see themselves aligned. And then also understanding that, um, during the admissions process, being able to demonstrate a clear understanding of whatever school it is that you're applying to, I think, sets an applicant apart and that they not only, have been thoughtful and diligent about their research of the school, but also that they demonstrate a really strong desire to be there and also, um, take the additional step to illustrate how they see themselves, in the future sense. Being a trained physician from whatever, institution it is that you are writing to. I think speaking both to your current knowledge and understanding of the program, but also your future desires and aspirations and how you think that program is going to get you there. So again, I would just say I think the biggest thing is with any application that you are sending to any school, really ensuring that it's tailored to that program. It speaks to not only your understanding of the program, but also how you think, you can be a meaningful and contributing member to that community.
Thank you, May. And I just have a quick follow-up. I guess, do you have a practical tip or advice for just writing the personal statement? Like, where should students start? I know it's on the mind of a lot of people here.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, this is kind of a reiteration of what I've mentioned earlier, but I think taking time to really thoughtfully and, genuinely reflect on your past experiences and your calling to medicine, to think about what that looks like for you personally and to, as you're starting to draft that personal statement, start there rather than starting from a place of you need to fit your personal statement into, some set guide or structure. There's not a set guide or structure. And I think that's oftentimes when people can feel really, feel like they really have to kind of conform their experiences to, some arbitrary structure or model, when in reality, I think personal statements, are all going to look different as all of our applicants have completely different experiences and backgrounds and callings to medicine. And so I think I would just encourage applicants to, as they're beginning to draft and think about what they really want their personal essay, or excuse me, personal statement to reflect. Maintaining just that your true voice and staying true to that. And so, whether that be, speaking to mentors and people who have played a critical role in your process and, having them as, resources to kind of hold you accountable to um, what experiences have been most influential to you. And, I think that's why mentors and peers and family members are really critical because sometimes they, help us remind us of things that we may have lost sight of or lost sight of, something playing a huge role in our lives. But leaning on that, leaning on your true voice, and also relying on your community to help you, just remember that and your past experiences, and then also really not feeling like you have to start from this perspective of you need to conform your personal experience to, this set structure of how a personal statement is supposed to look.
I really like the advice that you offered about, leaning on mentors and, just other people because those people can really serve as advocates for yourself too. And I think about my own application process where I asked people like Omar, who just asked that question to, hey, can you look over my personal statement? And he was able to offer me practical advice saying like, hey, you're selling yourself short. Like go into more detail about what you actually did here. And it was like super, super helpful. I see some questions in the chat. One person, Mariam, asked, is an applicant's major taken into consideration when looking at GPA? Oh, I think that's a really good question because I like to joke that I'm a public policy major, my brother's an engineering major. Let's just say I don't want to say there's easier majors than others, but it's clear that some majors might have some more grade point average inflation than others.
Yes, absolutely. And like I mentioned earlier, I think um any growth during your academic career, whatever that may look like, I think reflects, a really resilient and driven candidate. And that doesn't fit into any specific major or, there's no requirements as to what that looks like. In regards to prereq, excuse me, we are looking at your science and mathematics, so bio, physics, chem, and mathematics, and we have that outlined on our guide to application on our website, which I'm happy to include the link to that later. So we definitely do want to see that you have, an understanding for, those courses and that you have, completed them and, worked hard in them. But that being said, your specific major doesn't, hold, there's not any specific major that's weighted more heavily than others. And just like you were saying, there's such a multitude of majors, I think, especially, in this day and age that really are in in tandem and really impact and play a meaningful role alongside medicine. And so that doesn't, fit any certain size of major.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so if a student did college classes in high school, is that calculated in their final science GPA?
Yes, so if you have, completed AP courses or received college credit for other courses, that can count towards your prereq. The requirement that we have is that that's just listed on your official transcript. Um, and so that's something that, we're able to work with applicants directly as they navigate what that looks like and help them kind of understand specifically what that looks like. Because I know, of course, anytime transcripts in universities, it can be just a stressful process of ensuring that all that paperwork looks correct. So we're able to, help kind of counsel what makes sense for each applicant specifically. But yes, if you have received AP credit in high school, as long as that's listed on your official transcript, that can definitely go towards your prereq requirements.
And I think it's very natural for there to be a lot of questions surrounding grade point averages and just the stats because those are like the most common markers that we like hear about and see. of course, they're not everything, but one person was asking, would it be considered a red flag for a student to have straight A's for their prereqs under under division courses, but then a couple of B's in their upper division courses?
Yeah, definitely not a red flag at all. Again, we fully understand just the multitude of things going on for an undergraduate applicant, as well as, someone in a post-bac or master's program. Life exists just beyond the academic walls. And so, I think again, just showing that you have persevered even through, challenging classes, that speaks really highly of your drive and resiliency. And then also just your ability to speak to, experiences that have shaped you, even if it has, been a really challenging class. That's a really wonderful opportunity to speak to how you got through it, who you leaned on. How you grew from that. So it is definitely not a red flag for your upper division classes to have B's through those to show fluctuation in that. We do just want to see that you have a clear knowledge and understanding for those four categories of your prereq. And then, during your time in undergrad and in any post-bac programs that you have, worked really hard academically.
So another question that we're getting, sorry, they're all coming into the chat right now, which is should an applicant focus on any skills they've acquired in their personal statement, or should they focus more on their own story and journey to medicine and leave the skills for the activity section?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I know this is doesn't fully answer the question, but I think, both elements, it can look great in either way. I think if someone really feels that a personal story and their journey to medicine is um most impactful for their personal statement. Again, like I mentioned with your transcript and your grades, we have, the information of your activities to understand, those. And so we do have that knowledge. I definitely wouldn't say there's a hard and fast rule about, leaving skills only for the activities section or, only writing about solely your personal journey in your personal statement. But I think again, kind of like I mentioned, ensuring that your personal voice is immersed throughout the whole thing and that you are staying true to that instead of trying to feel like you are conforming it to kind of a set model. That really allows us to get a good sense as to who you are and what makes you unique.
And sort of also speaking on the personal statement, or this might even be a supplementary question. I don't believe Georgetown has this question, but some schools have asked, why physician, why being a doctor versus another healthcare professional? I guess from your own experiences as an admission officer, what do you think is a great way of answering that question? Like, why should people communicate, or what should they communicate about specifically wanting to be a physician rather than, other great careers like a nurse practitioner or PA?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. So this is kind of a little bit off track, but it will circle back. But for our secondaries, for that essay, it's basically asking why Georgetown. And so what we encourage applicants to do is for their, general essay to think of that as everything in the past. And so everything that's shaped you on your path to medicine, everything that's gotten you here to the point of application. And then for your secondary essay, to think about that as everything in your future. So, who you want to be as a physician, how you envision Georgetown shaping you into that physician. And so, in regards to your personal statement, I just want to make sure I'm reading this question correctly. Um, I think just being able to articulate your understanding of, what service to patients looks like through the lens of a physician. And so this also, goes back to your clinical experiences. We do want to see that an applicant has had direct exposure to physician and patient interactions. So being able to speak to, that unique interaction and relationship and what that looks like. And, this doesn't just have to come through shadowing. This could come through scribing, being an EMT. There's a variety of ways to get this kind of experience. But speaking to that relationship and your, direct understanding of the role that a physician plays in their patient's, not only care journey, but life in general. So definitely thinking about it in that way. Yeah.
I think that was a really nice way of framing it, where the primary is focused on sort of the past of what's gotten you here, and how the secondary is like, okay, now we've decided to send you a secondary application. Why are you actually a good fit at our school? I think, it's almost, it seems like self-evident, but I actually never thought of it that way. So I think that's a great piece of great piece of knowledge. I want to be respectful of your time, so I just want to give room for one final question.
Absolutely.
This was one that I saw in the registration that wasn't in the chat, but it was in the registration, and it was, when is it appropriate to provide like a supplemental essay? So, on the AMCAS primary, there's a section where you can talk about any of experiences that might explain why, I don't know, the grades aren't as great as they can be. But really, when is it appropriate? Because some people say, oh, it might be a red flag to do that if it isn't necessary.
Yeah, so I think which this kind of, stays along the general theme of what we perceive or don't perceive as red flags. There's really not anything that, is a very black and white, hard and fast rule about what should or shouldn't be included. As I mentioned, with your experiences or activities, if there's something you feel like it is helpful for us to have knowledge of or understanding of, we absolutely encourage applicants to include that, whether that be in their initial application as well as, in a post-submission update. There's, definitely not a red flag in regards to getting those updates and having further context into an applicant. So, I would just say that if, you feel called or, if this is something really on your mind that you want to include, we, absolutely encourage sharing that. Because again, that context is great knowledge for us to have and understanding. So, yes, I would not say we would categorize that as a red flag.
I'm sure that's very relieving and helpful for people. We are at 6 o'clock, so I do want to be respectful of your time. But if, anyone has additional questions, I do just want to let you know that, and you guys are all able to see my screen.
Yes.
Yes. I just want to let you all know that we do have a second session that'll be in the next few weeks. So if you have additional questions that weren't answered here today, please, of course, register for that. And you can also hear some additional answers. But I just really want to say thank you so much, Ms. Langston, for joining us. Even as someone who's been through the application cycle myself, I found this incredibly useful, and like I wish I had these pieces of knowledge and these insights before. So, you know, again, thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm going to put our office email in the chat, just if anyone wants to have it. Our whole team has access to that email. So we're always here to answer any questions, or, if our office can't answer it directly, direct you to the people who can. But thank you so much for having me and including me in this time. It was really great to meet all of you virtually.
So nice to meet you. And like Omar said in the chat, we really hope to have you at a NAAMA NextGen event again in the future. So again, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you so much.
Well, I hope you all have a good night.
Thank you. Take care. Thank you, Miss Langston.
Thank you.
So